Welcome to the Haunted Hangover podcast. I'm Louie, and I'm joined by, once again, returning to the show. I promised him, I told him, you'll be back again one day to talk about wrestling. I kept my promise, Mike. I kept it.
You did.
Mike from Whiskey Mourge. Welcome back, sir.
Louis, thank you, man. Like, I knew you'd stick to your word. But I can't tell you how excited I've been to do this, man, because as you could see last time, I just wanted to go off on wrestling tangents, and I'm always doing like the whiskey horror stuff. So when you presented the opportunity to do this, I was very appreciative, to say the least. So I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad we get to do this and be part of your tradition here going into WrestleMania weekend.
Yes, WrestleMania's this week, and we've done this 2 other times. That's it. Surprisingly, I haven't done this enough. Need to cover more.
I don't know if this is going to be the charm, but
no, I don't think third time is the charm with this one. But we've covered Halloween Havoc 91 and Halloween Havoc 97, and last year, from what I remember, it was the week of WrestleMania. So I think that's going to be kind of the new tradition. Cover one of these when WrestleMania, the biggest show of the year when it comes to wrestling. I think it's pretty safe. That's a pretty safe bet. You'd agree, right?
Yeah. I feel like no matter how much I fall out of my relationship with WWE, sometimes I feel like I'm still Rumble kind of intrigues me too.
Rumble's always good.
I just love who's looking at who's going to make an appearance, and even if they hobble down to the ring just for the cameo. But yeah, WrestleMania is always what kind of draws me back in, and especially lately with the Rock and Cody and building up the card again. So I'm excited to see what happens there.
Real quick tangent: who's winning that tag match? Cody, Seth, Rock, Roman. Who do you got in the tag match first? Who do you think's taking it?
I think they're going to give it to Cody, man. I think they're going to give it to
They have to. I also think the Roman Reigns Cody match. Cody better win this year. He lost last year.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to say too much, but I'm not a huge Roman fan. I feel like on paper, he's one of those guys. He stacks up. I won't knock him as an athlete and a wrestler and whatnot, but for me, it's like a contributing factor to not being as interested in WWE. It's almost like Diesel, Kevin Nash. It kind of reminds me of the same. Maybe we can get a stint of champion, but to sit on that for 15 years, it's where do you draw the line, right?
He's had that belt for I think 3 years at this point, which is kind of crazy. I know we're going on the WrestleMania 40 tangent here. We'll be getting right back to Halloween Havoc in a second, but I like Roman Reigns now. I think him as a bad guy, as a heel, much better. But I agree, it's becoming a bit stale what they're doing with.
It's a good way of putting it. Stale, yeah.
And I like Cody too, so I'm hoping they give and listen, it happened with what's his name, Cena. It happened with Randy Orton in the 2007, that time period where they were really big. And they, it got really boring. How many Randy Orton John Cena matches did we see back in 2007 and 8? Yeah. So that's wrestling. I will always say it, and I've probably said it on the show before. Even at its shittiest, I find professional wrestling entertaining. I can 100%. Always watch it. Much like you, I have my moments where I'm I'm not going to watch wrestling for 2 months, but it always brings me back in, man. It always.
Yeah, but it's funny because for a while I wasn't watching wrestling much at all, across all platforms, and then I've been loving AEW in the last
AEW's
year.
awesome, man.
Yeah, and it feels like what WCW became later on. To me, it's reminiscent of when you started getting into the Monday Night Wars, and I'm they need to shake things up, and I feel like it's the ebb and flow of wrestling, right? Where I guess in this case not WCW but AEW will push WWE to do bigger, better things. And then, who knows, in 2 years from now, I'm like, yo, WWE's the shit and AEW's been tanking lately. And you just, you keep on the same journey, right? So
that's how it was back in the day with WWF and WCW, just kind of, it was like waves. It'd be like, this week Raw was good. This week Nitro was good.
Yeah.
Some weeks both were good. Some weeks, and there was a lot of weeks, both were terrible. So it just depends on, just what the storylines are and what's going on. Now, you've always, like, I know, obviously, you just said it, that you've kind of been hit and miss here when it comes to watching wrestling. Yeah. Obviously, you're watching AEW now. I, too, am enjoying AEW. I think they're putting on a more adult product. It reminds me more of mid to late 90s pro wrestling. But you watched wrestling your whole life, too, right? Correct?
Yeah. So I think, like, I got started. What's crazy is, like, early in like being under 10, man, like my cousins, they would have like pay-per-view events. So if like WrestleMania was on, Rumble, In Your House, King of the Ring, all of those. No, it's funny because I'm mentioning all the WWF ones, but like we'd watch those, but I'd go back and I got into this addiction of like renting only, like we'd go to like Video 99 or Blockbuster later on, and we could rent whatever, and I would rent like all of the pay-per-views, like from earlier, like, when I was like 2 or 3 years old, when, so like late 80s, like super early 90s. And I feel like I grew up on wrestling, and I followed it into the Attitude Era. I would say it's only in the last, like, I don't know, like 8 to 10 years where it's kind of been on and off. But I definitely, like, I grew up with it, and that's why, like, the classics and, diving into what we're going to talk about today with like Havoc and 95. Like that's my jam right there, is just all of that stuff growing up. Yeah,
all the old stuff. That's
yeah.
It's always fun to revisit. Yeah. It's always fun to kind of just go back and watch it. And I always say, like, at the time, and Halloween Havoc 95 is definitely of the time, but at the time, even when it was like this, like the dumbest shit, like when you watched it in 95, you were like, this is horrible. And then watching it now in 2024, you're like, this is amazing because it's horrible. That's basically what it is now when you rewatch these old pay-per-views. And
but part of it too, but part of it too is like, you realize like what you would buy into with the magic. So I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the stuff that happened throughout this card, but some of the writing, you're just like, how outrageous is this? But as a kid growing up, at least for myself, right? You're like, holy shit, he fell off a building. Like, what? Like, and I was still buying in, because at this point, like, so 95, I was born in 87, horrible math, so I'm like 8 years old. So I can assure you that I believed people were falling off buildings, and someone's being resurrected from the dead, and all that stuff. It was like it was almost like mythological and superhero-esque the way these together. So it is funny coming back to it now and watching it. But I still have such an appreciation. Like, going through this, I was like, this is so bad but so good. Like,
you were cool with Hulk Hogan committing murder, basically, live on television. I was cool with it too in 1995, apparently. Like, wrestling is the only place where, like, you can kill an animal, a person, hang them, throw them off a building, throw them into a river. No one is ever charged or arrested. It's like,
I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you Monday night.
See you Monday night, brother. But so Halloween Havoc, you did watch these growing up, right?
So I will say I watched some of them. Again, I feel like naturally when it went more into the like the NWO era is when I really bought into WCW. I was big into WWF, but I still like knew what was going on. And naturally, because, if all of a sudden, like, growing up and, being early on watching like Hogan and Savage and all these earlier tapes of pay-per-view events. And then I was like, wait, where did Hogan go? Oh, like that other promotion company. Like, so naturally I kind of felt myself diving more into the WCW side, even though I was more religious to WWF, because, the wrestlers are changing between companies.
No, me too. I was the same way. I was more WWF at the time. And then it was weird because I remember being like 9 or 10. And even in 95, this was like a weird time with like WCW, because it was before NWO, like 95 specifically. Like Hogan had left, went to WCW. That was like a huge deal for them. You know, obviously the whole thing with Lex Luger, like him jumping over there, then Macho Man going over there.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal. So at this point, WCW wasn't like destroying WWF, but WWF was hurting because these were like their big guys. But they were also going through changes, like Shawn Michaels becoming a champion and stuff like that, where things changed over there as well.
And it's funny because in my mind, like without kind of doing the chronological math for a bit, in my mind, I was like the cutoff for me when I started, well, not the cutoff, but when I started going into WCW territory was like after WrestleMania 9. And it made sense because that was the Caesar's Palace, I think in 94. As I remember watching King of the Ring and Caesar's Palace, and all of a sudden it was like, WrestleMania 9 had Macho Man. He was doing more announcing at the time because I guess some injuries or whatever. And then you had the big Hogan event there with where he saved Bret Hart and took the title.
What a dick.
And then Luger's like narcissist act. And all of a sudden I'm like, where are these guys? And a year later we have Halloween Havoc 95, and here they all are. So a good segue into this card.
And even and real quick, like if you think about it, just a year later was like for life, like NWO was like literally like the following year. So kind of crazy, man. Like wrestling moves so fast, especially when you like followed it, and then to see just kind of even now, like, you know, we talked about Cody, him going from AEW to WWE. It's like just kind of, even now, it feels like old times, dude. You're seeing stars jumping ship back and forth, and it's exciting. It's exciting. Yeah.
And that's why looking at this card here, like this is like Hogan wearing all black.
Yes,
you know, and
predating NWO Hogan.
Yes, predating NWO, and you know his the Hulkamania has darkened a bit, and I feel like this is a really cool like foreshadowing. Like, you know, obviously I think it's a little bit unintentional, but for what's to come of Hogan and then the NWO the following year.
Yeah, so let's dive into Halloween Havoc 1995.
The horror of Halloween. It's WCW like you've never seen. The man becomes the monster when the immortal Hulk Hogan and the mysterious giant lock up in a sumo monster truck match. Then the monster becomes the man when these two colossal forces bring it to the ring for the World Heavyweight title. WCW presents Halloween Havoc. Sunday, October 29th. Live and only on pay-per-view.
So this originally aired Halloween Havoc 95. Good date. October 29th, 1995. Sunday. Halloween was on a Tuesday that year. That sucks. Okay. Yeah. that's not a good thing at all. That's a horrible day for a Halloween. And so the card is weird. So we both watched this on Peacock, which is for the most part the only way you can watch this pay-per-view. Yeah. And I thought it was interesting because I was doing some research and I was going like Wikipedia, Googling. The pay-per-view starts at a point where like 4 matches or 3 matches were skipped entirely. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
No, so like I when I was digging into it a bit more, right? Before we even started, I pulled up the card. And I was just like, okay, what matches are we going to watch before I like went to Peacock and I was able to watch it. And it was like, it showed me all these matches, but then, it literally had like a line and it was like, okay, the first pay-per-view match was DDP and Johnny B. Bad. And I was like, so are these like all dark matches that happened beforehand? Like,
I don't see what I'm thinking. What it was remember either two things, dark matches or these matches aired on remember Sunday Night Heat? Like like on the, I don't remember the context of like where why these 3 matches were just left off the pay-per-view. I'm assuming it's one of those 2 reasons.
Yeah. Okay.
Even looking online, I didn't really find, you know, why they weren't available, you know, on the pay-per-view itself. But probably the reason why, probably looking too deep into this in reality. But we'll jump down the card here. We'll start with the 3 that were not aired. And honestly, I'll be honest, I did not even watch them because they weren't on the pay-per-view on Peacock.
Yeah, so I didn't watch the other 3 matches either. I kind of just figured if we're doing the televised pay-per-view card, I jumped in, started jotting some notes with DDP and Johnny B. Bad. So we're on
Yeah,
the same page.
same here. So these are the 3 matches we missed. We've got Eddie Guerrero, one of the best,
Yeah.
defeating one of the worst, Disco Inferno. so there you go. In a regular singles match, Disco Inferno, one of the most ridiculous gimmicks of all time. I was never a fan of the Disco Inferno.
No, I'm all for like being extra and entertaining, but yeah, the Disco Inferno bit, like the John Travolta shtick, just wasn't my thing.
The best thing he had going for him was just coming out and doing that. That was basically
It was all downhill after that.
All entrance. The Disco Inferno. And then if you're a wrestling fan, Eddie Guerrero, one of the best.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it goes without saying. The second match, we've got Paul Orndorff. So that's another old school name.
Yeah,
defeating the Renegade. Okay, Paul. I forget who the Renegade was. I don't even remember. I was trying to. I was like,
I looked into this not too long ago too, because I was going back to I had an obsession with like going back to like Undertaker versus Undertaker when there was 2 warriors and they tried to make us believe like.
Well, I think the Renegade was like their version of the Ultimate Warrior, but like I forget what like he was like a shitty Ultimate Warrior. Like that's basically. From what I remember, but I don't remember like his real name. I don't remember whatever happened to the Renegade. He just sort of vanished after
we'll see an episode on Dark Side of the Ring.
Oh no, I hope not. Those are always sad. And then Paul Orndorff. I think if you're a wrestling fan, you recognize the name.
Yeah.
Then the third match that was not televised, a name that's quite controversial: Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko. Speaking of Dark Side of the Ring, Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko defeated the Blue Bloods.
Yeah.
Lord Steven Regal, he's the fucking man. And Earl Robert Eaton, who I remember vaguely as a tag team with William Regal. So Chris Benoit, one of the best too. Dean Malenko as well, but he had no charisma. But Chris Benoit, one of the best, but... You got to use the white out there to erase a lot of stuff.
It's a shame because when you talk about like technical wrestling, man, like and you think about him and Dean Malenko, and it's a good balance because, like you said, I love Malenko as a wrestler, but like the charisma part wasn't his thing.
He just went out there with like holding like a towel and wearing a vest.
Yeah, the towel was his shtick.
And a vest, and he just would destroy you in the ring. But you give him a mic, you're winning that battle. And Benoit was great, man. He was the man. It's just a bummer where that went.
Yeah.
The less we talk about that, the better. The fourth match that was not aired, we had Craig Pittman defeating VK Wall Street, which was, you know who that was, right? VK Wall Street. VK Wall Street. That was IRS.
Yeah. IRS, man. I love IRS.
That was his WCW name.
So
VK Wall Street.
Wall Street.
He couldn't use IRS. Bray Wyatt's dad. So there you go. Well, I don't know. Did you know that Bray Wyatt's dad's was because Bray Wyatt's not around anymore. IRS is his father.
For real? Oh,
yeah. You didn't know that?
I didn't know. No.
Yeah. IRS
That's crazy.
IRS is Bray Wyatt's father. And then Craig Pittman, I don't remember that dude at all. So maybe do not remember. He obviously became a jobber. I'm assuming. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Doesn't ring a bell to me at all.
No,
so
neither.
Here's the card, and we're gonna just continue running it down, and then we'll dive into some special moments here. You know what? Before I get into the card, I want to talk about one thing because I always talk about this whenever we cover the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view, and that's the set. Before we continue, because I feel like we'll forget and brush over it.
Yeah.
This, as always, on point with their little mausoleum set, with the tombstones, with the fog, with the lightning, with the monitor inside one of the mausoleums, the giant Halloween Havoc logo. I love that one of the tombstones, for some reason, says Elvis lives. It's fantastic. It's
I went through and paused them. I was going, I was trying, yeah, because I was like, they always have stupid shit on there, right? And I was like, Elvis lives. I'm like, this is wild. But I just love like how they lean into like how ridiculous the whole thing is. But again, if it's Halloween, it's your excuse to go like over the top, and that's part of the tradition, man. Is like you got to look at that entranceway and that set because it's always really good.
And even like with the on-screen graphics, they used a spider to kind of transition and crawl across the screen to reveal Tony Schiavone's name, or Bobby Heenan, and then it's all Old English. So they even changed the like graphics on the screen to announce the people and the wrestlers and stuff like that. So I just always love those small details. I've mentioned it before when we've covered previous Halloween Havocs. I just love that they stuck with it. Like even bouncing around from like, I think the first one was 89 to 95. They kept it going. They didn't get lazy, which unfortunately they do eventually, but cross that bridge when I get there eventually.
When their faces like Hogan and the Giant, their faces are becoming so skulls good and whatnot. I'm like, yeah, man. I'm like, for what it is at the time, right? You're like, cool. Again, you gotta really play it up, man. If this is Halloween Havoc, like, yeah, we need faces turning into skulls.
That terrible CGI intro warms my heart. I love it.
Yeah.
Dude, the full moon background, the lightning, the haunted house with the little jack-o'-lantern. And it's funny because you mentioned the two skulls. It's like the Giant, Hogan, they like cross dissolve with like a really shitty skull Halloween mask. It's not even like it's very odd, but it like works. It looks like a really cheap haunted house video. Chef's kiss. I love it. But one more thing, and we'll continue with the card. Yeah. Because I'll be honest, some of these matches, I don't have much to say because there's not much to say about them. Yeah. The big thing with this pay-per-view was that the Giant. Now, I'm going to take a step back even further. So the storyline up until this point was Hogan was going up against the Dungeon of Doom, which they didn't like Hogan. They didn't like Randy Savage. So they were dealing with the Dungeon of Doom. Now, the Dungeon of Doom was a bunch of jobbers. You had the Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan in there. Yeah. Kamala was in there, but I think at this point he had quit the company.
Yeah, he quit.
Who else was in there? The Zodiac, which was Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
And then sadly, speaking Dark Side of the Ring again, the Shark there with the Earthquake.
Which
I mean, an Earthquake was great in his time, but seeing him in the Shark gimmick just wasn't nice.
So bad.
Yeah.
And it was basically taking established wrestlers and turning them into like these hokey creatures.
Yeah.
It was so like not even like it's wrestling. Wrestling's always corny, but like this was like really like ridiculous. It was basically they created them just so Hogan could defeat them. Because every single one, and there's a big one we're going to talk about much later that comes at the end of this pay-per-view. But like basically they created these characters just for like Hogan and Randy Savage to squash. Yeah. Which happens, in this pay-per-view. Really, really odd. And then you've got the Master. He just yells all his promos. He's like this big, overweight guy sitting on a stone throne. Like, I am the task. Like, that the Taskmaster was the other guy, but I am the Master, Hulk Hogan. Like, he just yelled all of his promos. Weird time in WCW history. And they had their own little, like, they literally had a dungeon. So, like, that was so the storyline was Hogan has to defeat the Giant, who was a part of the Dungeon of Doom. Yeah. But for some reason, because the Giant used a monster truck to destroy Hogan's motorcycle, they're going to have a sumo monster truck match before having a real wrestling match.
Yeah. What? But what really sold me on this, before we get into the monster truck part, was the kayfabe story of it being Andre the Giant's son. So I feel like we're in a moment where I was thinking about this today, and I was like, they were really chasing, I think, for Hogan this this glamorous pay-per-view, and it's kind of like sad when we see how it turned out. We'll talk about the card at the end of the card, but like it's like for me, I was like, oh my God, this is Andre the Giant's son. Again, growing up and believing
Yeah.
it, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And we know like the rivalry that Hogan and Giant had. So, to see this come together, it kind of was interesting, right? Now, again, I guess because Dungeon of Doom are so wacky, they located Andre the Giant's son, and now they're bringing him back, and they're in Michigan again. So you're trying to create the same thing in Michigan where it's Hogan versus Giant, and this just becomes a really sad version of that.
It's like the bootleg version of
it's
Andre
the bootleg.
Hogan. Like it's basically like
it's the Alibaba AliExpress version of.
To the point that they even had him perform like the what's it called, the slipped my mind, the infamous move where he grabs he grabbed Andre, the press or whatever.
Body
slam. It is the body slam. They even had him recreate that. Was not as impressive the second time around. But yeah, that's Hogan's storyline. Dungeon of Doom hate Hogan. Hogan must defeat them, but first he has to have a monster truck match with the Giant, and then a traditional wrestling match. One other kind of plot in this Dungeon of Doom situation is Macho Man Randy Savage having beef with Lex Luger because he thinks that Lex Luger is a part of the Dungeon of Doom. There's some drama. Where does he align with? Is he Macho Man really wants him? Is he with the Dungeon of Doom? Is he not with the Dungeon of Doom? But the agreement is that they can't just wrestle each other. Randy Savage has to wrestle a member of the Dungeon of Doom, beat them, and then Lex Luger has to wrestle a member of the Dungeon of Doom, beat them, and then they could have a match. Very convoluted way to get to a match.
Yeah, what was weird is that like they almost created this like mini tournament thing where it's like they each had to have a match first, and then I kind of dove into it a little bit more because I was like, why? Like, it just seemed odd, right? And Savage has a torn tricep in this event too. So I'm like, dude, you have a torn tricep and you're going in for 2 matches. Now you realize like, they're not like the most elaborate matches. But then when I was reading it at this point, Savage was really into like getting a practice match in. And this made even more like you could deep dive too much. This made less sense to me because I was like, you had these dark matches earlier that like weren't televised on pay-per-view. So if Savage really needed like a match to get warmed up or whatever, like again, I don't know, this is like stuff that's circulated online, but I was like, why not do it in a dark match that's like not televised and then do your big thing with Luger after? But yeah, they made this weird like he has to fight someone from the Dungeon of Doom and then Luger has to have a match naturally because he needs one too, and then they meet each other. And so already on like a thin card in terms of like what we got going on, it's like, like 3 of the matches include those 2.
And I just think it's a way for them to kind of, it's Halloween Havoc, Halloween, spooky, horror. There's a lot of Dungeon of Doom in this pay-per-view. There is a lot of the Dungeon of Doom. Their presence is felt. Even the Master got an entire segment. A lot of Kevin Sullivan, the Taskmaster, too. He pops up at least 3 or 4 times in this pay-per-view. Let's get back to the card here.
Yeah.
So, first match, and probably the best match, and I'm curious if you agree with me or not.
Yeah.
The best match on the card is Johnny B. Bad defeating DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, for the television championship. I thought it was the best match on the card.
1,000%. And I wish if you saw like my jot notes that when I was watching it, it started off so strong. So I think like for this one, I have like maybe 8 solid points, like praising what I saw. And then after that, it's just like 1 or 2 little jots. And I was like, like squash shit. Like it's one of them just says like shit. But this one here was good, man. Like I felt it had a bit of like, fun in it with like the stunt double at the beginning with like, DDP waiting for him to come out. And obviously Johnny Bad's in the audience. He comes out. Someone has a bucket ringside. Why? It's just like of all illegal weapons, like there's a bucket, but the wrestling was great. Like I feel like, I said there's a ton of great spots. All the atomic drops that occur throughout the match.
Yeah.
The one thing that to me that was sweet was the hip toss into the into the DDT was sweet. So like, there was so many great spots in there that I was like, yo, this is a really great match.
And it was for a belt, which every other match, like besides the main event, was just either a singles match and then one.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah,
it's the only other one that was actually for a belt. So it makes sense that it would be a good match, especially with the guys in it. Listen, Johnny B. Bad, Mark Marrow. Some people remember him as Mark Marrow.
Yeah,
he was an athletic guy. You know, and this was when Johnny B. Bad was getting away from the. We've talked about Johnny B. Bad in a previous Halloween Havoc episode we did here. But, you know, originally he was kind of like the Little Richard gimmick. And then at this point, he was more serious. And, you know, it was more of like him being an athlete, a wrestler. And he won. And it is a great match. One more little detail about this match, and it's not even about the match itself that I love, is I love the faux Johnny B. Bad. It's a trick or treat, they even said in the commentary. With the it's like a robe cape that looks like spider webs it says Johnny B. Bad. It's black and white, almost like Venom colors. Yeah. But it's like a big cobweb with I think there's a spider on it. Really sick. Johnny B. Bad, even though it wasn't technically him, still representing the Halloween goodness in his I guess doubles wardrobe. All right, it all goes down here. From here.
Great start. Let's.
Yes. All right, Randy Savage, the Zodiac, horrible.
So I'm sure most people listening, but Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
Yes.
We got he's part of the Dungeon of Doom now, and we have the Zodiac. I mean, so the whole thing was it was supposed to be Kamala. Kamala quit. Yes. You mentioned earlier. Kamala quit. So supposedly this was like a throw together. And again, made no sense for me that like Savage needed this match. He has a detached tricep muscle. It was really a squash match. But like the
Zodiac is ridiculous, dude. He just looks. What is this that he kept? I was trying to remember. I was like, if you're listening to this, if you're watching the video version, you can see it. But like, he's like, it's like it was weird. I don't remember. He kept doing this when he's like putting his. I don't even know how to describe it for the audio only version.
I don't know what sign this would be for a Zodiac, but.
And he's wearing like the white face paint. He looked really. Listen. Brutus the Barber Beefcake, even when he was the barber, looked ridiculous. Yeah. But as the Zodiac, he was even more ridiculous. This, though, is what got me.
Face paint has saved many careers before, helped with reinventing certain personalities. But in this case, no, it wasn't. It was no good.
No. But yeah, this match was maybe 3 minutes long.
Yeah, and the biggest pop was because a fan ran into the fan ran into the ring. And Brain tries to cover it up. Bobby Heenan, he's like, oh look, it's for Macho Man, and it's like, no, it's just because of fans, and they obviously cut it up right, and like,
dude, the dude looks like a wrestler too. He's got like long blonde hair, and he's like I don't know what he was doing. He's like swinging his head around. He didn't even try to attack. I don't think he attacked any of them. I was so confused. It's so weird.
But I didn't know. I said, you know what? Like where I guess you see some experience is like watching that. Like Savage like didn't miss a beat. He took the match outside the ring.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's and I was like, okay, that's some like professionalism right there. That he just kind of kept going with it and moved the match outside.
As loopy as Randy Savage was as a character, the dude had some great matches in WWF and WCW. Like, the dude was just great. And you're right. Like, as embarrassing as, because he pops up again later, as embarrassing as his matches were on this card, you're right. I didn't even think of that. It was good, really good professional wrestling and being an entertainer to kind of jump out of the ring to avoid the crazy hair metal guy that wanted to attack them in the ring for some reason. That's one of the most exciting things to happen on the pay-per-view. So,
like we said, we're going to keep going down, right? So
next up, Kurosawa with Colonel Robert Parker defeats Road Warrior Hawk. Who wants to watch one of the Road Warriors by themselves wrestle and not in a tag match? Not much to say about this match, if I'm being honest.
The only thing I noted was that I guess that like the only comment I wrote down was that like it wasn't a great match, but I felt like Hawk like semi-seemed athletic. And I guess there's a lot of question about his work. So, but it was interesting because I always felt like New Japan wrestlers seem to be able to bring that out in certain people. Like it was like not too long ago where I saw Hogan's work in New Japan, and I was like, oh shit, like Hogan can do that stuff. Like I think I was talking with Zach, our buddy from Terror Racks there, shout out to Zach, and we were like watching some of these videos, and I'm like, yo, Hogan isn't just a leg drop, like he was doing some moves there, and so that was the only redeeming quality to me, is that, like, you know, wasn't a great match at all, but like, you know, that, like, I guess like Road Warrior Hawk kind of fighting with him brought out a little bit more of like the athleticism, I guess.
I don't know. I didn't do the research. I don't know why Hawk was by himself. I'm guessing, what's his name? Slipped my mind. Hawk and Animal. Animal must have been hurt or in trouble, or something must have happened where Hawk was by himself. Yeah, odd. Anytime you see a tag team wrestler alone, I always felt like it doesn't work, but it is what it is. Next, a really interesting one, because I forgot this guy was in WCW at the time. You've got Sabu with the original Sheik.
Yeah.
And JL, which I don't remember JL. I did like Sabu when he was in ECW. That guy was a psychopath. This match was very sloppy, though. I will be honest. You know, Sabu's like just throwing himself over, like on the ropes. He's bouncing off. It was a very sloppy match.
It was Sabu without tables and barbed wire. It was just him throwing his body around. But
dude, at one point he like jumps off the ropes and kicks the original Sheik in the head. I don't know if that was supposed to happen or not. He literally whacked him.
No, and supposedly, like, at this point, supposedly at this point, like, he wasn't doing well. Like Sheik, supposedly he was going through a bunch of complications. So the fact that he's there and he's fragile, and Sabu's doing this crazy shit and even knocks him, I'm like, yeah, you're gonna take this man's life.
Yeah, and Sabu won the match, but I was just like, it was a very sloppy, once again, not a very long match. It's probably like 5 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
Next up, to continue the Macho Man Randy Savage story that we mentioned earlier, we've got Lex Luger and Meng, part of the Dungeon of Doom, in a match that ends very sloppily with disqualification. And then I do want to comment on Meng's hair, though. He's got
that flow.
Dude, he's got some combination of an afro with it's like an afro mullet braid hybrid.
Yeah.
What?
And you know what? This match just made me, so I didn't mind Ming in like other matches and stuff. And I've just never been a huge Luger fan. Like, I get that dude looked incredible. He was okay with, in terms of having like some of that like personality and that showmanship, but I'm just like, yeah, like watching his wrestling here, I wrote down like clunky. I was just like, that was the first word that came to mind. Is just it's crazy because like they made that match way longer than it should have been.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's not going anywhere, and it's kind of all over the place. And like I literally wrote like clunky and unnecessarily long. Like that was the two things. Two comments.
You're right though. Like Luger and like they're both. Luger was never like a ring general type guy. He was never like someone that was like really great. It's all power moves. The dude was all juiced up, roided up at the time, obviously. And then Meng was just like this big, mean guy. So, you know, it was a lot of like hitting each other, clothesline. Like it was just, and then the disqualification with the ending, like just to kind of keep the mystery alive if Lex Luger was a part of the Dungeon of Doom or not. Horrible.
Yeah, the writing felt like there was a bunch of patch jobs where they're like, okay, now we have this match, and then how do we continue this botched storyline? So yeah, there's just a lot of confusion there as to what's transpiring, and trying to follow along. But one thing I want to add just very quickly is building up with this whole Macho Man and Lex Luger saga here is I wanted to throw in the comment on I fucking was howling with Macho Man's promo he cut with Mean Gene.
And I'm going to tell you something, Hulk Hogan. I heard what you said about me a few days ago, yeah. And I don't think that you can separate business from friendship. I'm your friend. But if I ever see you in the ring, I can beat you, don't you know? Yeah.
Randy Savage, I know
your mustache is crooked.
Your beard is a little sideways, too, but I don't want to get into that.
That's
I'm not going to take personal pot shots at you or anybody else. That's not my nature.
Get in line, everybody's
I'm a little
after
better
me.
guy than that, I don't mind telling you.
Cool.
I'm a bigger man.
Oh my God. I forgot. I couldn't even I didn't want to go back. I just watched the whole thing. I didn't transcribe, but he was talking about like curiosity, like a cat. And then the best of when he's like, he fucking screams at Mean Gene. He's like, your mustache is crooked.
Your mustache is crooked, Mean Gene. That's not even his voice. He's like, your mustache is crooked, Mean Gene. Like, and then I think Mean Gene's like, your beard looks a little crooked. I was like, all right, they're insulting each other's facial hair for some reason. So, yo, Mean Gene was the man too, dude. Back in the day,
I know he was one of my favorites.
That dude's voice just reminds me of my childhood. Like anytime I hear it, I just feel like I'm 8 years old again. And Macho Man too, dude.
Yeah,
Macho was like my favorite. I think I said it on the show before, but Macho was like one of my favorites as a kid. So,
dude, as a kid, I didn't really like. I mean, I had a few favorites, but the one wrestler I ever got to go meet in real life was Macho Man, and he was at a Zellers. And Zellers is, I think, just a Canadian thing. And it was one of those like in the mid '90s, and I don't know why he was there, if he was promoting beef jerky or whatnot.
Probably.
But my dad took me to the event there, which is sweet. So it was like one of the fond memories, because like these guys are like the superheroes when we were growing up, right? So
yeah, man, I was a huge we mentioned Lex Luger. I was not a fan of his. I was a massive fan of Macho Man. So like an 8-year-old Louie would be like, Macho Man, destroy Lex Luger. Because even as a good guy, I didn't like Lex Luger. When he was like a face, I was like, he's... No. I don't know. There was just something about him I never liked as a kid. But Macho Man, the weird, raspy voice dude, was the one that gravitated towards children. That was like slinging Slim Jims like to all of us. So next up, which is another match that on paper should have been like fantastic.
Oh yeah.
We've got Sting, Ric Flair on one side, and on the other side we've got Brian Pillman and Arn Anderson. All four of these guys, phenomenal.
They can
wrestlers.
Work. Yeah.
All four of them are like, the only one that's not around anymore is Brian Pillman, but like Sting just retired at 65 years old.
I wrote that down too, and I was like, that was like 29 years ago, and yeah, I mean, like, again, like, so Sting was like, he overlaps between some of those classic guys, but he was kind of like newer at the time. And then, we watched him go through all that. So just to kind of go back and watch his event, and having just watched him have his final match with AEW there, I was just like, it's really cool to kind of go back and see some of these.
It's almost surreal to see him, like, all jacked. Surfer Sting,
Surfer Sting.
And then to see him now, like, obviously the Crow gimmick is what he continued to adapt, like use, and change.
Even though he'll tell you that it was never inspired by the Crow.
Bullshit. I always loved Sting too, and me too. I loved Crow Sting was more like the one I remember as a kid, more so than like Surfer Sting. But I do vaguely remember Surfer Sting. I remember a kid at school had a Surfer Sting action figure he would bring with him all the time. I think a weird memory I have as a kid. Like, I was in elementary school, and he would bring it with him every day. And I remember seeing it and being like, who's that? Like, before I knew who Sting was. Yeah. So really, really kind of just his look, just seeing him go from like the way he looks here to the way he looks now. It's just like a completely different, it's like an interesting transformation as a wrestler, But yeah, Sting and Ric Flair defeat Brian Pillman and Arn Anderson, but then Ric Flair betrays Sting. Surprise, surprise. To like start the formation of a new Four Horsemen.
Yeah.
So
and like Sting starts the match, and like Ric Flair supposedly got beat up. And the best is he shows up in his like street clothes, or he's wearing literally like suit pants, and then shows up to the ring, and you find out after, of course, that he turns on his partner Sting there, who's been struggling the whole time. And it's a shame, because it was I said what a big setup, because again, like, kind of revisiting the card, I didn't remember some of the storylines that were going on at the time, and this was the start of like creating the new Four Horsemen, and so I didn't know where the match was going to go, and I was like, oh, this is such a waste of talent on paper.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. When you think about it, it's like, look who's in the ring in this match, and like it's a disqualification because Flair turns on them. They all start beating up Sting, and it's like they leave yelling, and Flair's wooing, and they're throwing up the four. It's like, again, this was the beginning of a new storyline. That's why. Yeah. That's kind of why it just seems uneventful.
When the more I'm looking at the overarching theme here is like, this is almost like the phoenix about to rise. I feel like you need to
Exactly.
like a lot of these stories, like there was a lot of like messy shit going on. It was like a clusterfuck. But like look at what came, like what birthed out of this. Like if you look at just even this event, like again, we're going into this renaissance of like WCW where like the NWO are going to merge and the Four Horsemen are returning. So I feel like this serves a purpose in the timeline to kind of set us up for something much bigger and better to come in the following year.
It's the middle of the story, basically.
Yeah,
Is what's happening. So next is one of the main events. One of the highlights in this ridiculous pay-per-view. We've got Hulk Hogan and the Giant in their sumo monster truck match. According to Bobby Heenan, one of the most exciting things he's ever seen. Like, I think one of them say, and I'm like, guys.
My notes and commentary were all about Bobby Heenan's commentary because he's trying so hard
to sell it. He's trying.
Yeah, like he's trying to keep the stories together. Like when all this is just such a mess, he's just selling it. He's trying to make it all make sense to the audience. And you got to give him credit for like having to work with such material.
And now we have to take a second here to describe these monster trucks, because this is the reason why when I told you to come back on the show and join me, and I know you want to talk about some wrestling, I was like, we got to talk 95, Halloween Havoc 95, because of the monster trucks. I just went to my first ever Monster Jam. I love monster trucks.
I saw you. Yeah.
Yes, they're great. They're fun. It's always a good time. It's my first time ever going to one, so I'm like, I want to go to another one. I've always like watched it on like YouTube and like on TV and stuff, and I always got a kick out of it. So I was like, you know what? I saw my first ever Monster Jam live. Let's talk about the Halloween Havoc that has monster.
But you know what's cool, and I guess like we can, I guess it's somewhat like of a connection. We'll go Jersey. I know you're not in Jersey, you're in Brooklyn there. But like the thing for me was like I remember in and around that time, I couldn't tell you if it's the same year. Every year, my family go down to Atlantic City or Wildwood, New Jersey, and on the beach there. And one year, I would say it's mid '90s, they had Gravedigger on the beach. And so like for me, again, I didn't really know anything about monster trucks, but I remember seeing Gravedigger on the beach and just being so fascinated. So yeah, like what stuck out to me with this one was the monster trucks. Like when you look at it, it seems so ridiculous and outrageous, which I guess is like also a part of this card in terms of theme.
Yes.
But it made sense to me because when I think of like 95 Little Mike, I was like, yo, I was at the beach being, holy shit, I saw Gravedigger. That was amazing. And now there's Hogan and Andre the Giant's son who are going to fight in monster trucks in a sumo match. So I'm like, I could see how I was buying into this extreme ridiculousness.
They definitely, I think WCW, like when they, I don't know if at this time it was Eric Bischoff or not. I know he was there, but I don't know if he was as involved. He might have been. I think they thought this was going to be more exciting than it actually was. I don't think they realized how like lame and kind of slow two monster trucks tied together, pushing each other into like, at one point fireworks go off, like sprinkler, sparklers go off, and like it's dumb. But yes, the monster trucks themselves look awesome. So
and you could see they were pushing the cross promotion, right? Like that was a big thing, obviously.
Yeah, I believe the people that made these monster trucks also were the ones that put together Bigfoot, who's another infamous, because I think the dude that was with them, there's that guy that's with Bobby Heenan. He's sitting with Bobby Heenan and Tony Schiavone. I think he's the one that made them, and I think I remember them saying he's the one that created the original Bigfoot or like made the monster truck. So so one of them looks like Hulk Hogan. It's got the yellow and orange, or the yellow and red. I mean, it's got the 24-inch pythons on each side, an arm on each side holding like the front like bumper or whatever, and then the bandana. His bandana, it had a bandana. It looks more like a do-rag on the monster truck than it does a bandana. But I was like, I love how they added that in. Like,
the details.
So stupid. Now, the Dungeon of Doom's monster truck was sick looking. It's like this like, dragon skull with a spine, and then the Dungeon of Doom's logo on the side. And like the eyes were the window and like the front window there. And then they had these cameras inside each one of them where you could see Hogan and the Giant driving them and kind of going crazy. And you could tell both of them did not know what to do.
Oh, yeah. 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 I noted that too. I'm like, where they're just showing inside and they're just like, you can tell it's just free for all, right? And Bray's like, they don't have helmets on. He's emphasizing there's no helmet use.
Oh my God, dude. Oh man, I was dying of laughter just watching this because at one point, like they cut to like Hogan, and I'm this is what I'm assuming is what happened. So I don't think they were actually driving them because there was another person with them off screen. I think that might have been who was controlling it. And because I don't see them letting these two professionals, maybe they did, but like
I noted that too. I wasn't sure because I was like at one of the angles I saw that there's just other people in obviously one other person with each of them in there, and I was like, is it them like pretending to drive? Because I mean, as lackluster as it was, I mean, like how many people can jump in and like even just do this tug of war with like monster trucks, right? So I mean, they're just kind of going back.
Monster trucks dancing is what it was.
Yeah,
it was like like back and forth.
But the commentary too, again, because Brain's trying to spice it up and make it more exciting. He's like, he's gonna push Hogan into Toronto, and I was like, okay, I know Americans are horrible with Canadian geography, but I'm like, on the other side of the river there is Windsor. And I'm like, Toronto's 4.5 hours away.
Oh, come on, Bobby Heenan.
I was like, okay, you'll push him to Windsor. I don't know about Toronto, but.
Oh my God. Well, one of them says, I have it highlighted here in my notes, that they were making history. So I don't know, during this monster truck sumo battle, they were making history.
29 years later, Haunted Hangover, we'll talk about this.
There you go. Hey, listen, I guess history was made. We're here fucking revisiting this stupidity. But it only gets dumber from here because Hogan wins by pushing the Giant out of bounds because, again, sumo rules. And both of them get out of their monster trucks to confront each other, and like the Giant's upset, like, dude, you lost fair and square. Why the fuck are you upset? And they start to like throw some haymakers at each other, which leads them to the edge of the building, which we hinted at earlier. Manslaughter was basically there was a homicide happened on live television. The Giant grabs Hogan, lifts him, air quotes, lifts him off you could see Hogan push himself up, lifts Hogan off the ground to the ledge. The Giant gets up on the ledge himself. There's like a scuffle. Hogan, I think, like elbows him or something. And then we've got the most cartoony image of the Giant like swinging his arms about to, like trying to regain his balance. And then he just falls back off of the building. And then the next shot is like Hogan trying to catch him. Like Hogan tries to like grab him, but like obviously couldn't do it. And he's like, we need an ambulance, brother. Like call an ambulance, brother. I need some help, brother. And he just runs off out of the frame. And Tony Schiavone and like Bobby Heenan are distraught. They're not. Bobby Heenan is concerned. I can't believe what we just saw. Can someone?
Yeah, he's like, no.
Can someone get us an update on the Giant?
But earlier he foreshadows it because like earlier I was laughing so hard because like knowing I knew this would happen. I remember that part of it, and he was like, as long as he says like, if they go off into the river, you won't find them for months. And insinuating if you fall over the edge, which we'll get to what happens when you fall over the edge, and you don't go missing for months. You go missing for 15 minutes.
Dude, this is so dumb. It is so like just sitting back and like after watching it, I was like, this is one of the silliest things in the world. I love it. It is so dumb, but I love every second of this dumbness. So yes, Bobby Heenan is not happy. He wants an update. Where's the Giant? But first we have to have a match to kind of, pace out the main event with the sumo monster truck match. So we go to the Lex Luger, Macho Man, Randy Savage match, which Randy Savage wins, but it's really weird because I'm even looking at like the times. I just realized like I just typed in their Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Every match outside of a couple is like 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
So to kind of go back to like what you said, like why even have Randy Savage on the card? I get it because he's Randy Savage, but like you could have given this spot to someone else. It's just really, really weird that this.
Yeah, and I started thinking maybe it was because of the whole, like, we know like behind the scenes that Savage's insecurity was like what Hogan was doing, and like them two had to be on par. And you know, he's probably thinking like this whole event's built around Hogan and the monster trucks. So we're kind of seeing what's happened in the past. So I feel like, you know, even with again a torn tricep, like your work's not great right now, and you're on two matches on the card, right? So and dragging it out way longer than needs to be.
And this match, again, he wins, Randy Savage wins, and we still don't know if Lex Luger is part of Dungeon of Doom or not, from what I remember. Like, it's still, obviously, at the end of it, we learn the true motivation behind Lex Luger. But that's kind of the whole thing, is like Randy Savage not trusting Lex Luger, but whatever. Randy Savage wins. Moving on to the clusterfuck of a main event here with the Giant, who survived. He did not die. He did not.
Yo, Hogan comes because Hogan comes out. Hogan's like, brother, like he's like, and he starts off with like an apology. It's kind of like an apology, and you know this what happened, and then so Giant shows up, but unscathed. Like if there was a river, you wouldn't know. He's not wet. He's not injured. He's just walking out.
I do like you mentioned, and I'm glad you did. It like starts, you're right, with Hogan like, man, brother, I don't know, dude, what's going on? Like, I didn't mean to knock him off of the building, brother. Like, it's so, like, I want to know what happened in between that happening and this match. There is no like.
And poor Bobby Heenan there. All he could say is like, he's superhuman. He's superhuman. That's why he's walking down to the ring. And I'm like, I don't care who you are. If you fell into a river, onto concrete, like, come on, you got to sell it a little bit more. But he's like, he must be superhuman.
He's a giant, and he's a part of the Dungeon of Doom. He is supernatural. So
there's some supernatural elements. Yeah, there we go.
There's a supernatural element to the giant surviving drowning and falling into stuff. But yes, I do like that little tidbit of Hogan kind of apologizing for what he did. So dumb. This match is paint by numbers Hogan stuff. So this is what happens, and there's a lot more ridiculous, and this tops off Halloween Havoc 95 in a nutshell. Yeah. So you've got the Giant, he's with the Taskmaster. You've got Hogan with Jimmy Hart, who's always been his boy. Jimmy Hart was always with Hogan. That was kind of like, that was his dude. He was always with him, you know. Jimmy Hart always was his manager. A lot of back and forth in WWF and WCW. They were always sort of, you know, that was always a thing. Even when he came back years later, Jimmy Hart would show up with him occasionally.
Yeah.
So, surprise, surprise, in the middle of the match, Jimmy Hart turns on Hogan by, I think he hits the ref with the belt.
Yeah.
Knocking the ref out. Then I think Hogan is choke slammed, or he's about to win, and then Jimmy Hart enters the ring and hits another ref or the same ref again with the, and it's a clusterfuck.
Yeah, and then the second time is like, oh, now it's more clear that he's not helping Hogan out and he's working against Hogan.
And then I think Lex Luger runs out and they start to beat up on Hogan. And then Randy Savage runs out because he knew he couldn't trust Lex Luger. They're all getting beat up. They're trying to, you know, survive this fucking battle. And then one of the highlights
I'm snorting, man.
One of the many highlights, but the true highlight, and I think what a lot of people, besides the monster trucks, remember about Halloween Havoc 95 is the Yet-Tay.
Yet-Tay, Tony Schiavone.
Tony Schiavone. The Yet-Tay, who is a like 7'5". He's bigger than the Giant.
Yeah.
If you notice.
Yeah. He's big.
He's a giant mummy, the Yet-Tay. Comes out.
But that was amazing, okay? Because like, okay, first of all,
Yes.
I have to say, my wife bought like a Yeti mug, and I was like, Yet-Tay, and she's like, what? And I'm like, my whole life now, I'm just like, Yet-Tay. But like, I was like, okay, it's Halloween Havoc. He's dressed as a mummy essentially.
Yes.
But he's a Yeti. Like, why did you take this like snow monster angle, but then dress him up in toilet paper and bring him on? I was like, why like it's Halloween Havoc. Why wouldn't you just be like the mummy? Like what?
Why couldn't they give him like an Egyptian name, right? Like they had to give him the Yet-Tay. But he comes out all lumbering with his like arms out, all stiff. And the Giant and the Yet-Tay do the most awkward bear hug together. The Yet-Tay kind of like grabs him and like shimmies a little bit while the Giant is like holding him. And he just keeps raising up his arms. It's so stupid.
I said it looked like something I saw in grimy nightclubs. Like it's
oh, dude. And I'll tell you right now, the Yet-Tay did not last very long, and neither did the rest of the Dungeon of Doom after this. This was the nail in the coffin of the dungeon, like for the Dungeon of Doom.
So I didn't know who it was, and I looked up, and I saw the name was Ron Reese, and I was like, oh, who is he? And I rang a bell once I kind of looked at it. He had a short-lived career, but they had called him up for this event because it was supposed to be the Giant Gonzalez who was supposed to be the Yet-Tay. But supposedly had like health issues, and I remember the Giant from again WrestleMania 9, so everyone's kind of overlapping here. And that stint with Hogan, so I guess he was going to come out, but yeah, so they put Ron Reese into this, and my favorite though is that like he kind of breaks character a bit, and he's all of a sudden he's like talking shit, and he's like, yeah, what's up, and then all of a sudden he just kind of goes back and he's like, oh, I got to remember that I'm a monster and I got to do this.
It's weird. It's funny that you mentioned Giant Gonzalez, another large man who was not a good wrestler. I always remember that terrible WrestleMania match. Macho Man on commentary. I could smell the chloroform. I think I've said it. I think I've literally said this on the podcast before, but like that is literally one of my favorite line deliveries from Macho Man Randy Savage on commentary. Like when Giant Gonzalez, like the chloroform on, like it's so dumb. Like I'm pretty sure Giant Gonzalez was in that match, and I remember like the chloroform. I could smell it. Oh yeah, like oh my god, oh god. It's
it was with Undertaker. He kept choking on Undertaker. Yeah.
My apologies for the terrible Randy Savage impression.
No, that's good, man. I think that's a pretty good presentation.
Oh god, man. But yes.
But on the contrary, I will say that like I noted that in the actual match that the Giant moved really well. Like I feel like, you know, and then I found out he'd only fought a few times. Like it was like
he was like 25 or something. He was really young.
Yeah, and they said that like, he barely had any experience, and then they throw him into a main event to kind of again like recreate this Andre the Giant moment or whatever. But I was like, yo, even him flipping back on the ropes and kind of landing on his feet outside the ring, I was like, you see some like more like athleticism and agility for a big guy. Again, like he's young, he's huge, but yeah, it was nice to see him, like, you know, the ending there with Ron Reese dry humping, and it was sad that it came down to that.
The Yeti humping. Humping. It's like they're having like an orgy on. It didn't look like a bear hug. I was like, what the hell's going on here? Like, it's so awkward. It's like, obviously they went with the right big guy for the Giant. Like when you look like yeah, the other guy was bigger, but he didn't even know how to perform a proper bear hug. It was quite embarrassing.
It was awkward.
Oh my god, dude. So good. So good. It's a train wreck. The whole thing's a train wreck. And this led to the next pay-per-view, which I believe was WCW World War III 95, which was like the 3 rings next to each other, matches and shit like that. So Yeah, man. Crazy, crazy, crazy pay-per-view. Ridiculous, absurd. Just everything about it was, had to turn a light on. I'm getting a little dark here in the video version if you're watching, but that's how it got with Halloween Havoc 95. It got a little bleak towards the end. Perfect timing. Yeah, man, this is a sight to be seen, this pay-per-view, man, as a wrestling fan. Like, just some of the, like, really odd decisions that were made. Like, they thought this shit was cool. Just like the Yet-Tay, just...
It's like that's what it was. Is like, I imagine the writers being in the room, like, let's just imagine like a boardroom, and they're all like throwing ideas and spitballing and getting excited over this and being like, oh my God, yeah, like you already have the giant, but imagine a mummy bigger than the giant, the Yet-Tay, comes out, and it just, the execution was horrible, and it was all like a big clusterfuck with a lot of confusion, a lot of like clunky missed spots. But yeah, it was quite the mess. But again, it was necessary to move forward and learn, and then what would become in the following year.
So, two things. I think it's safe to say we both agree that our favorite match was DDP and Johnny B. Bad.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Started strong.
What is your least favorite, if you had to pick one? I could tell you mine if you want a second to think.
No, you know what? I'd probably go with like, I'd probably go with Savage and Zodiac.
Zodiac.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So bad, dude.
Yeah.
As soon as you said it, I did the Zodiac sign. That's, oh God, what an odd gimmick to give Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Again, I know I'm repeating myself, it's redundant, but yeah, dude, so weird.
But again, the whole thing of, like we said, wrestling is always over the top and extra, but a lot of this just felt silly, and the Zodiac just felt right at par with everything, and just in terms of just being like super silly. Like, okay, like you could try to create a new gimmick and whatnot, but this just seems like too much.
You want to hear something? I have the Wikipedia page in front of me here.
Yeah.
You want to know how long that match was? The actual count. You want to know how long that match? Randy Savage, the Zodiac, 1 minute and 30 seconds. Yeah, dude, they didn't give my dude the Zodiac. They didn't even give him enough time. Like, he didn't even get a full match. Yeah. It was like, that is a squash if I've ever seen one, honestly. I mean, I've seen shorter squashes, but goddamn.
Yeah, some of those early Warrior matches. But.
Yeah, dude. They gave the Zodiac 1.5 minutes to, like, wrap it up, man. Come on, Rand. Yeah. Hit the elbow. Let's
also, when you think about it, this was all like the Hogan Road show, like the circus, right? Because, like, as we got older, we realized who was in Hogan's camp. So you could see why they'd have to fit something in with, like, Zodiac or Brutus being part of it, right?
Those are all, like you said, those are all his guys. So they all had jobs in WCW.
Yeah, they're all working.
What was your favorite moment? I know mine. Man. I have two. I have a runner-up and my favorite moment. So,
for me, I know I already mentioned it, but it was two. Okay, so two. Like, the first one was like the commentary with like Brain trying to again sell it. So, like, the 4 hours away. I mean, when he mentioned like they're gonna go to Toronto, he's gonna push him into Toronto, and I was just like that's the closest Canadian city, even though like Windsor literally could see like Windsor across the water. But to me, it was like Hogan apologizing and just like being like, he said like, brother, dude, like, and he was almost like dressed down a bit. Like, it was kind of like a mix of like ring attire, but not. It was like, I know it was his new look, but like this happened beforehand. But I just loved how there was like Hogan was lacking his like charisma and whatnot. And the excuse was that it was shaved off in his mustache. Like,
his superpower.
His superpower was shaved in his fucking mustache.
Oh my God. Let me tell you something, Mean Gene. That mustache, brother. Oh God, this is the dumbest thing in the world. Listen, for all the listeners, it was honestly fantastic to read. I hadn't watched this pay-per-view in a million years, and I loved it. It was a joy. I'm with you there. So my runner-up is the Giant falling off of the building and kind of swinging his arms and falling back. And then Hogan's promo apologizing for killing the Giant is there. And the Yet-Tay. The Yet-Tay is...
Yeah, I almost left out the Yet-Tay because I was like, okay, like this is like obviously like the most ridiculous and over the top moment. But yeah, you can't like, I think most people know it because of that. Like if you're like, do you remember Halloween Havoc 95? They might say monster trucks or they'll say Yet-Tay. Like it's one of the two.
It's always the Yet-Tay. Always. Yeah, oh, if you Google right now, and this sums up this pay-per-view, my closing thought, it sums up the entire pay-per-view. If you go on Google and type in Halloween Havoc 95, one of the first things you're gonna see is an image of the Yet-Tay.
And then he disappeared. He was gone after that. The dungeon, like it was never a thing.
The Yeti had his moment to shine. Halloween Havoc 95.
Then came out for a little dry hump, a little dancing on grinding on the dance floor, and then he was gone.
Then he was off into the sunset. Bye-bye, Yeti. Bye-bye.
What in the hell is going on? And who is on whose side?
You are seeing the end of Hulk Hogan. It was a good career. You had a great run, but it's over. It is over.
The Yet-Tay is taller than a giant. Look at the size of the Yet-Tay.
So that was the train wreck, Halloween Havoc 1990. A lovely train wreck, Halloween Havoc 1995. Mike, thank you again for joining me. This was a blast, dude. Honestly, I think this is my the most fun I've had talking about a Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. So I really want to thank you for joining me here. And it was just, I have not laughed this much in a while. So it's been great, man.
You promised me, you made it happen. This exceeded expectations. Like this was nice. I know you and I kind of chatting beforehand, but getting the chance to talk wrestling, I don't get to do it often. It's something that happens in like friend circles between a few people. But like for you to have me on here and get to like do this and record it, man, this is awesome. So like anytime you want, like invite me back. I know you got to diversify the guests, but if you want to talk wrestling or you want to talk anything else, I'm 100% game.
Mike, you're always welcome, man. You're always, trust me, this is not 2024. This is not the last time you'll be on the show. So you're definitely coming back. If we're going to talk some stuff, we're going to talk some ridiculous shit like we did here today.
Oh yeah.
But yes, where can people find you in Whiskey Mourge?
Dude, main source probably on Instagram at Whiskey Mourge is where you'll find my pairings and my day-to-day postings and entertainment and musings. You can find me on Rue Morgue TV. I host Horror on the Rocks. And if you want to check out some more cool stuff, you can check me out at www.whiskeymorgue.com.
And be sure to subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Haunted Hangover. Head over to hauntedhangover.com for links to everything, including our Patreon page, which includes bonus spooky content and early access to episodes. Rate and review us. It'd be greatly appreciated. And as always, remember, the best cure for a hangover is...
more booze, brother.
The Yet-Tay.
Yet-Tay booze.